Hello and welcome to Infrastructure Matters, the podcast dedicated to exploring the world of infrastructure, asset management and public works. I'm your host, David Jenkins, CE of IPWEA. In today's episode, we're joined by Rachel Chambers, former mayor and passionate advocate for outcome-driven governance. Rachel shares her unique perspective on the challenges of elected leadership, the importance of asset management, and how she helps shift council culture forward towards long-term thinking. We'll dive into her journey of learning on the job, influencing her peers, and collaborating with technical experts to make smarter infrastructure decisions. This is a must listen for anyone who wants to understand how elected leaders can play a vital role in shaping resilient, sustainable communities. Well, I'm delighted on Infrastructure Matters to welcome Rachel Chambers, who's joining us for our podcast today. So, Rachel, thanks for joining us.
No worries, David. Always a pleasure.
Now, I remember when you spoke for us at the Gold Coast and the Asset Management Congress, you did a fantastic job, and the audience, the feedback we got was really good. We'd never had elected members or elected member and mayor actually speaking to our fraternity before. If I can just start with the first question, which, you decided to become an elected member, and on that was, giving back, advertising and giving back to your community and the importance of. Is that the reality of the job?
I think that we have the job description all wrong, but tell me who would put up their hand if they actually knew the reality of the job. Please sign up when your community wants more for less every single year. Of course, we're not in the habit of disappointing community, and do that in a way where you have competing demands from all different departments on a singular budget, and you're the one that has to go and deliver the bad news. I think that if you actually advertised it the way that it actually turns out, not very many people would put up their hand. So it is very interesting in that how we think elected members are representative of the community, and they are, but boy, there's a big job underneath it.
And so how did you, so your background, you didn't have a background in asset management previous.
No.
And then you obviously recognise the importance of and managing, a large number of assets and a set amount of budget. Where did you start? So, when you sort of first came aboard, the first, council meeting you had, and you suddenly realised, okay, this is a bit different to what I thought. How did your sort of thought process, how did you work through that and then work with your other colleagues or elected members?
It's really interesting how it happened for me. So if I frame it, we're in a region with only 10,000 people and $1.1 billion of assets. So our ratios were quite high. Ratepayer, so ratepayers were only 7,000. So 7,000 ratepayers, $1.1 billion of assets. Now, that was never a figure that, as a person getting elected, that I really looked at. I looked at community wanting more road maintenance and more water, assets, et cetera, and they wanted more service delivery. They wanted people to mow the lawns more and look after the cemeteries and things like that. So it didn't occur to me until our LGAQ, so our local government Queensland, rang me and said, Rachel, we'd like you to come and talk to us about your asset management planning. And I said, look, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what are you talking about? And they said, look, we really think it's going to be a bit longer than a phone call. We want you to come in and talk to us. So I did, and I found out there were these things called asset management plans, and they were compulsory. Wow, they're compulsory. And when you looked at the asset management plans, it had all these amazing, what I would call ideas about things. But when I actually, and it took me months, David, it was not an overnight light bulb. It was like, oh, okay, there's these plans. Now what? What happens with these? And remembering that I wasn't a councillor, so I was a community member that went straight to being mayor. Then as I was looking at the plans, I was like, oh, it says we will do this. When are we going to do that?
Right. So, is that when the light bulb went on?
You can see the evolution, and it was basically a pile of questions that I just kept asking until it was so piled up. I was like, oh my God, Houston, we've got a problem. And I distinctly remember asking for the fleet asset management plan because we had 4,000 kilometres of unsealed road network that we had to maintain, and of course
significant. Yeah,
it was significant, and we needed to look at the machinery. And I just asked for a fleet plan, a fleet asset management program, and then the staff begrudgingly sort of came to my desk, sort of shaking this program, because what it said is we were basically completely outside the scope of the program. We were completely working outside our policies. And that was due to councillors taking money from budgets year on year before and not understanding the repercussions down the line. So all of this culminated into my love of asset management.
But let's just go back on that very last point you said, where councils have been taking money and shifting it away, and so therefore around maintenance and renewal that there wasn't the monies to do that. How did you go about changing that culture and that change?
Oh, all cultural change is a long term. First of all, it was about having a bird's eye view of all our assets.
Yeah.
So councillors are humans, right? They come in and they absolutely genuinely want to do the best for their community.
Yeah.
And they have the community's hopes, wishes, future on their shoulders. So they usually come in with a bugbear of something. Yep. So you've got the guy who comes in with a bugbear of roads because he used to run a transport company, and he's going to get in there and he's going to make some changes. You've got a retired plumber who absolutely knows what needs to be done with the water assets and in there. You've got a retired school teacher, or you've got an up-and-coming business person because the region's economy isn't right, and that might be because they believe the town centres need work and things like that. So everyone comes in with something.
Yeah.
And then you've also got, sitting behind the board table, you've got all your individual departments. So you've got your water department and your roads, department, and you've got your engineering department versus your accounting department, etc. So they all give advice from their own lens. So the first thing we had to do was get on the same page and get all the information together. So we then did the reassessments of all our assets. So then we sat at the table and went, okay, here are all our assets. We have 400 bloody barbecues and 12 town halls, and we've got this and this and this and this. And then we got the engineers to come through and tell us stuff. Then we got the accountants to come through and tell us stuff. Yeah. And then, we got advisors to come through and tell us stuff. And that's when it was like, wow, we've got some work to do. Yeah. I think just the sheer notion of getting everything on the table at once, rather than having a department coming in and asking for a budget and then back. And so everyone could see the extent of the assets we needed to look after, and then the small amount of budget we had to do it in. It made us more of that strategic team that we needed.
How did you resist the temptation that, maybe not, but some elected members may have sort of come on the premise that they would develop more services, right? They might, and I mean, that's part of, an election cycle. People want to get votes. They want to be re-elected. There's certain things they might want to do. Like you've said, there's certain agendas. How did you sort of curb that back? Was that very much we need getting all the assets again on the table and saying, well, this is what we've got to look after. So before anyone starts thinking about building something else, is that how you did it?
I said it was that. And if you want something, what are you going to lose?
Yeah. Okay.
So come to the table. If you want something, what can the community do without?
Yeah.
So, that's confronting for a councillor, right?
Of course.
Who then is charged with that decision of not just going out to community and saying, oh, look, we're going to take this away, but going out to community and having that conversation okay, guys, you want this, but we can't have everything.
Yeah.
What can we do without?
And let's talk about the community aspect, because did you, as part of the sort of change or the way you did things, did you change the way you interacted with the community, and what was that? What did that look like? Because people talk about engagement with the community and their feedback and etc. It's a hard thing to do. How did you go about doing it as the mayor?
I've had now some years of reflection to think about it, and there's probably, and you know how different generations think of problems in a different way. I would say that generationally there is something about engagement, in that I found that a baby boomer generation, they didn't want me to go out and ask them what they wanted, because they felt that as mayor I should know what was needed and just make the decision. And they actually thought me genuinely going out and having engaging conversations meant I didn't know what was going on. So I gave them a sense of sort of underlying fear that, the boss doesn't know what's going on and she's actually asking us, well. Whereas, the younger generations were actually, yes, the participatory budgeting style is definitely up our alley and we want that collaborative model, etc. So I think there's a lot to be said with understanding your audience. At the time, I also understood that as councillors, you have hours and hours and hours and hours of briefings and hundreds and thousands of pages of reading that you have to do, and you have advice from everyone. You've got that. Whereas when you go out to the community, you're either having maybe a 10-minute conversation with someone, which would be quite long. Maybe you're having a radio interview that went for 10 minutes, but they only cut 2 minutes or maybe 30 seconds out of that. Maybe you've got 30 seconds on TV to tell your story. That there is a significant disconnect between what a councillor has sitting on information and what is able to be shared with community. I don't think we got it right. There was I felt that we were definitely transparent, and we definitely went out to explain the process to our community. Whether they appreciated it or not probably depended on their generation, depended on their own circumstances, depending on how much they could disseminate the information we gave them. One of the media advisors that we had at the time said, "Rachel, you're going out with too complex a message, and people can't understand what it is that council does." And I said, if they can't understand council, then that's just another reason that they should trust those who do to get the job done right. So I wasn't about to to wield the message down in that how complicated asset management is and all the issues that surround it, because I didn't want community to think it was a literal walk in the park and you could just get in there and turn a dial and everything would be okay.
Let's flip it slightly. So, most of our members, as you know, are local government engineers, directors of infrastructure assets. So what advice would you give them? And I'm also talking about the young aspiring engineers who want to get to the senior leadership team within the engineering fraternity. What advice would you give to them when they're talking to elected members, and how should they present the information? And what tips would you say, work well and get sort of good outcomes?
I would say anyone who is charged with an asset. So engineers themselves will have to start thinking themselves that they are charged with an asset in council, whether that asset be a bridge or whatever, but they themselves have a job to do in that you need to think about what service the asset is delivering to community. So we don't talk about bridges.
No.
We talk about how community traverses
gets around
from one side of a place to another. That's what a bridge does. So I think for too long engineers have been talking about bridges and roads and components about roads and stuff to elected members. The really great future for engineers is to start in local government is to start speaking to elected members about the services the elected members in the community want into the future, and then be able to work out how to deliver those services.
Yeah.
So if a community wants swimming lessons and rehab for their elderly, et cetera, then that equals a swimming pool, maybe, or it might equal something a bit different. I think for too long we've been talking on one side about this is what community wants, and we're talking in the context of services.
Yeah.
Engineers are talking about, this is what the community wants, and they're talking in terms of the asset or components of an asset. We just need to find a common language.
And that last point that you said, common language, is something that I certainly talk a lot about and interested in your views. So you said, so you use common language, and you also talked about the various different advisors. You had the finance department, accounting department, you had the engineering department. But you and I both know that obviously asset management plans need to link into long-term financial plan. Therefore, the accountants and the engineers,
ideally, David,
the accountants and the engineers need to be talking to each other. Now, we push that a lot. So again, when you were sort of working as the mayor and trying to build the change in thinking around that, did you try to impress upon the various different departments to try and coordinate and work together, and how did that go?
I had a very supportive CEO. So, of course, every organisation has to be led in the direction that the organisation really, wants to go.
Yeah.
So you have to find a CEO who will champion asset management, because it's going to have a lot to do with the CEO and how they themselves bring the teams together.
Yeah.
You then need and it's not just a mayor. A mayor is, is one vote. Yeah. And yes, they are the leadership of the team and the leadership of the community. But when it comes to a decision, a mayor is but one vote. So you then need to have a whole council team that understands asset management as well. As far as bringing together the engineers and the finance, that's really easy. It's what you just said. It's the long-term financial management plan. It's like, well, it's there. Yeah. So maybe just get that out on the desk and say, okay, does anyone want to talk about this? Because when you understand assets, deliver services, and then you can start talking to councillors in terms of how many times do you want that park mowed? What do you want it to look like in the end? How many times do you think grading that road? And we actually started attaching it to data. So we used a program that monitored on unsealed roads the roughness index. So we used the International Roughness Index and then said, what does community think is a safe driving speed? Yeah. And what does government think is a safe driving speed on unsealed roads? So it's about 80. So we said, okay, across the region, this is the standard of road, and then we put a price to it. So then when we started talking across all the different assets in terms of services, then we all had a conversation in, could we lower that? It's that triangle, right? Can we increase our risk, decrease our risk? Can we increase our service delivery, decrease our service delivery? Do we increase our cost here or decrease our cost? They're your only three levers. And we all talked it through.
Yeah, okay. When sort of looking back, two things. What advice would you give to people wanting to be elected members? Right, that's the first thing. And then also, what advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know now, back then? So if you.
I've got a slide deck of 17 pieces of advice that I would give to myself again. But what advice I would give to elected members is, and I think it's in one of my slide decks from that Gold Coast conference, in that as a team, and I talk about my team being three. So you've got your team as an elected member with your other elected members. Yeah. You've got your team with your elected members and your community. Yeah. And you've got your team with your elected members and council staff. Yeah. So that's what I mean by team. Yeah. So as a team, we build communities that we use the assets to build the communities. Yep. And it's as simple and as complex as that. Yeah. So I would say to an upcoming elected member, if you don't understand that as a team, your job is to use the assets to build communities, then you're probably not going to be happy in the role, going forward, because it is, there's a lot of understanding assets and their life cycles and what they're used for and all the rest. And there is nothing I am yet to find in council that delivers a service without an asset.
Yeah. And then what advice, because I know you said there were 17 parts, but if you sort of break it, what advice would you give to yourself that you know now, back then? What sort of couple of key things?
I remember an aha moment was when I was in China and knowing that I was a new kid on the block. I was a new councillor, new to this whole local government scene. And like every well-meaning councillor comes in and just wants to make changes fast and leave their own legacy. And one thing in China that they did really well is that in every foyer of the businesses, they had everyone's photos. And when I asked why, they said, because this is everyone who has ever worked at this business. And they had like hundreds of years photos accumulated because it's China, right?
Yeah.
And I said, why? And they said, because it's the Chinese way to look back and thank people for the legacy they left. Look at the now and thank people for being here to do the job that they're doing every day. And then leave the blank part of the wall, because you have to leave way for other people in the future to come and leave their legacy. Yeah. And I thought that was so iconic for council, because councillors change every 4 years and they change at the whim of community or, and those kind of political struggles.
Yeah.
So my first thing I learnt is to stop and seek to understand the decisions that went before you. Because it is my firm belief there is no councillor who sits there that wants to make a bad decision for community. So if you're looking over someone's shoulder and saying that's a bad decision, potentially it's not. You're just not understanding the dynamics in which that decision was made. So that was my number one, is don't be a bull in a china shop, David. Because I certainly was. And I certainly had to apologise when I came back from China to my whole team to say, I am so sorry that I've disregarded everything you've done to this point, and I've learnt my lesson. I think the other thing is the silent majority are really hard to hear. So you talk about doing things politically, you're trying to get the big number and be popular with the big number.
Yeah.
But sometimes you only hear from that really limited minority, and they're really loud. So it's about understanding, are they the minority or is it the majority speaking to you? Because a loud proportion of everyday citizens don't care what council does. They don't care what an engineer does every day, and they won't care until it stops doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Some really early advice I got was only 5% of the community you will ever hear from. Just remember you work for the other 95%.
Different way of framing it.
Yeah.
And how did you, this probably goes back to your first point, because you're a CEO in your own right. That's your day job, chief. And, this is and many are, elected members of business, not all, but some, business owners, CEOs, etc. It's always managing that fine balance between, it's a very different role when you're managing the operations to when you're in a governance role. An elected member, you're a governance role. And you made the point quite clear. You said you need a CEO that's going to champion a lot of this stuff and actually needs to help you with the operations. Did you find it did you find it challenging though? Being a CEO and a dynamic CEO and then coming in, but then taking a slightly different role, which is a governance role and as an elected member?
So I wasn't a CEO before, but I was a business owner previously and had multitudes of different things. But I enjoyed it. Yeah. So, there's something all CEOs know, that there's an enjoyable part of being a CEO where I've got a board now and I say, you know what, here's all the information. You just point me in the direction you want me to go and I'm happy, but you make the decision. There's a liberation about not being the one to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
If you're an engineer, you can give all the information over and you're not the one who has to make the decision. So that part's good. The other part of the board is that whole decision-making about you're the one charged with getting this right. So there's an empowerment, but there's also an amazing amount of pressure that way. I think the juxtaposition in it is elected members are supposed to be planning for generations to come. Mm. Political cycles are much shorter than that. Mm. So the bureaucracy of council has a real role in keeping that continuity right. And I think there's a job to be done at the launch of every new election cycle where you should be doing a lot of groundwork before any decisions are put to a council, where you're actually teaching them all about the assets, all about, maintenance schedules, all about new service delivery catalogue and service levels and stuff like that. Because you're missing, if you don't do that in the upfront, then you've lost a real key opportunity to bring the team together. So I think that's where the governance side and the CEO side comes in. I have seen many a councillor dip their toe in folly by going from the board table into an operational table. Yeah. I recommend that to no one. I think it comes from not understanding how to use the systems you have. Yeah. So councillors run the council. Make no mistake about councillors run the council, but they run the council through the long-term financial plan. They run the council through the strategic plans. They run the council through their annual budgets, which then give way to all the work that needs to be done. I think that they don't spend enough time understanding how they all fit together, because I know I could run the council just by those mechanisms in itself and policies, though.
Yeah, okay. If there's one lasting bit of advice, so we'll have we've got people maybe listening to this podcast who might be thinking about being elected member, doing elected member training, our members who are local government engineers, as I said, and we're beginning to get sort of more people across, particularly in the sustainability space, the urban foresters, the landscape architects. If there's one or two bits of advice you sort of could give people to take away from your experiences in local government, your experience as an elected member, sort of building upon what you've said very well over those last 30 minutes, is there anything else any other bits of advice you'd give?
Another piece of advice someone told me, which was useful for a councillor, was budgets have three parts. Now, I was not an accountant either, so I had run businesses.
But you run businesses, yeah.
Yeah, but what they were talking to me about is that even though a council may give $1 million to maintenance, unless the machinery, so plant and equipment, and unless the human resources match the outcome you were seeking, the outcome won't be there. So when you're talking in the terms of budget as an elected councillor, I would start speaking to the CEO about the outcomes. So are we going to have this much road maintained at this standard for the next 3 years, rather than here's $1 million that surely you can do it. So then the conversation becomes much broader. It's we don't have the graders to be able to do that. We don't have the human resources. We've got an issue with swapping teams and all the rest. So I think it's about having those outcome conversations, which of course that's how communities speak. They speak in terms of an outcome. But I think for me, when I was told budgets have three parts, always remember it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. That's a great note to end on. This has been a brilliant conversation. Thank you ever so much, Rachel, for joining us.
Wow. I love coming back to local government assets, so thanks for having me back.
And you said, and I mean, people still talk about the presentation that you did in the Gold Coast. It resonated with a lot of people, and I'm so glad that you're still part of what we do, and obviously for taking the time to speak with us today. Because if you listen to this, you'll get a lot of insight, and your knowledge speaks for itself. So thank you ever so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the opportunity.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Infrastructure Matters. A big thank you to Rachel Chambers for sharing her inspiring journey from business owner to mayor and how she brought asset management to the forefront of council priorities. To our listeners, we hope Rachel's perspective has helped you better understand how elected officials can be champions for infrastructure. Be sure to follow and share this episode with colleagues across local government. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Infrastructure Matters on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. I'm David Jenkins signing off, reminding you that in the world of infrastructure, every detail matters.